Welcome and a very warm welcome to your second lecture on the MBA programme. It's very nice to see that some of you have managed to make it live, and also welcome to those of you who are listening to the recording. And you've had a really busy week for your first week as you find your way onto Blackboard and around Blackboard, and have been making your way through the materials and meeting your classmates. But I hope you enjoyed it, and I know you've obviously been busy with the 2 seminars and with last week's lecture, but it's lovely to see you today, and I hope that the environment is starting to seem a little bit more familiar to you. So a very warm welcome to the 4 of you who've made it live. We'll see how things go over the course of today's lecture and give you audio rights as and when we need to. But any questions at any time, please do just ask them in the chat. As always, the lecture is going to be recorded and will be made available after today's session. So last week, we introduced the university, we introduced Leicester, and we introduced you to the programme and to the virtual learning environment, and talked to you a bit about what you were going to be learning and how. In this week's lecture, we're going to focus on accessing resources and continuing your learning on the MBA, which provides the foundations and the skills that you need in order to move into the substantive part of the module. So our main aims today are going to be, firstly, I want to spend a few minutes just reflecting a little bit on Induction Week 1. And if you've got any questions or concerns that have arisen this week, then let's address them and raise them here. It may be that some of them will be addressed as we move through the lecture, but what I want to do is make sure that you go away feeling that all your questions have been answered, or you know how to get them answered. And that's why I think it's so useful to have some of you here live, because you will be able to ask questions that many others on the intake will be learning from as well. Secondly, we'll move in to think a bit more about what you're doing this week and what you're working on in terms of the week that we call Getting Started, because you're really beginning to get to grips with some of the material and resources that is available to you. Specifically, we're going to focus a significant part of the lecture on the issue of library resources. And what I'm going to be doing is I shall hand you over to Andrew Dunn, who has provided us a recording about the resources available in the library. I will make that recording available separately outside of this lecture so that you can access it and dip into it and out of it as you need to. But I wanted to play it with you and sit alongside so that should you raise questions, we could also answer some of those as we go. I'm then going to be talking a little bit about what's happening next week, in the last week of the induction week 3, which is a really good week, because by then you're beginning to feel a bit more comfortable in the environment. You've already met members of your study group and are getting to know them. And then we're going to set you the challenge of a team task within that. And that's really good fun. And it's a challenge, but it's enjoyable. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that. And then I'm going to very briefly talk a little bit about what happens after week 3 as you move into the main body of the module, managing and developing people and organisations. Okay, so one of the aims of the first week was to get you onto the environment, into the virtual learning environment, and to meet your classmates. And let's have a look a little bit at how that is going and how the socialisation element of the first week is going. So far, as of last night at any rate, and it may have changed from this morning, but 15 of the 34 of you have managed to personalise your Blackboard profile. And some of you have managed to do the same within Collaborate. It's strange, you do have to do that separately. And I noticed amongst the 4 of you here, so Tom has managed to do that. So the rest of you perhaps can ask Anton if you can't find how to do it. I must admit, I set myself the challenge in the last lecture that I would do it, which I have done so. I thought I did it once and then realised I'd not saved it, so I had to do it again. So make sure you save your profile when you edit it. And 15 of you, as I say, have managed to do that within Blackboard. And it's really nice to do that, because to have a face that goes with the name is a really good idea. Now I can see that the sound is being impacted for some of you, so I'm going to switch my video off now to see if that improves things for you. And we also just need to mute, so Rawa, if you can mute your mic, I'll just see if I can make sure I've muted everyone as we're getting a bit of feedback there. Brilliant, so welcome all. So we've got 15 of you with your personalised Blackboard profile. And then the other issue is about finding and engaging with initial resources and using them to communicate to various audiences. So to start with, part of that's about getting onto these lectures, finding the recorded versions of them, and also finding the live versions, as the 5 of you here today have, and as others did last week. So that's a good start. And it's also about engaging with those audiences using the discussion boards. And 22 of the 34 of you, which is approximately 65% for those who like numbers, even though I realise with numbers that sort of size, percentages are not totally meaningful, but about 65% of you have made it onto the discussion boards by, or at least have made posts on the discussion boards. Others of you, I know, have got onto the discussion boards but are yet to post. So go and pluck up the courage, get that first post in, and then you'll be making contact with others on your intake. And funnily enough, at this stage, 65% seems to be about average, that each intake, about 65% of you have tended to be on by this time. So if we can help you, or if your colleagues can help you to get going, let us know and contact us. But get that first post in and make sure you've introduced yourself. So we've also been reflecting on engaging with those initial resources. So as I say, part of that's about the discussion boards, but part of that's also about the materials and finding articles and the additional readings and engaging in the online lectures. So Rawa, you raised your hand, but was that just a test? Feel free to type in the chat if you've got a question or you're struggling. But I think you might just have been testing the icons, which is great. So if anybody has got a question, do just raise your hand using the icons at the bottom. So any questions or concerns so far about the first week? Okay, that's good. If you think of anything as we're going through, do feel free to ask. And I know you've been working closely with Fred on the study group discussion boards to iron out any problems that have emerged. So that's a good start. So on to week 2 and getting started. So this week, you're already working your way through this, but the things that you're working on are accessing the materials and now resources from the library. Understanding plagiarism and how to avoid it, and we'll come back to that a little bit. And related to that, thinking about referencing conventions. And I'm sure you've all been involved in dealing with references, but sometimes if you've had a break from education, reminding yourself of the conventions around it are important. And students get really worried about things around plagiarism. So the two go hand in hand, and we can help you to make sure you're following the necessary conventions. We're also thinking this week about critical thinking and active reading, and I've very deliberately put the two together because they are part and parcel. Active reading assists in critical thinking, and thinking critically will assist you to read actively. And both of those help you remember what you're reading, engage with what you're reading, react to what you're reading, and get much more out of it. And we're also thinking about different methods of making notes. And again, this is really important, and I'll come on to why shortly. So you have a to-do list this week. So we will be doing all the things that we've just mentioned through the usual mechanisms. And those are the number of mechanisms, including, so you've got your online materials, your self-guided lesson, so the additional online reading. And do make use of all the links as you're working your way around, because that gives you the information much to come back to at different times. You've got today's lectures, and you've got 3 activities that we're asking you to undertake this week. I've just noticed my own sound appeared to be problematic, so I hope you can all hear me okay. Do let me know if there's any problem with that. We've also got the discussion boards at the cohort level that you've found, and we have a few posts there. So if you want to talk to me about today's lecture, post your questions on the Lecture 2 forum. And you've also got your study group discussion boards, where you will be talking with your classmates and with Fred in the Week 2 forums. So let's have a look at some of that in a bit more detail about what's happening this week. So, as I said, you've got a number of links, and we know there's quite a bit of reading going on here, but do read all the external resources linked to the materials. And you can download elements of that and keep them. Think about your own filing system and what you will want to come back to, but you can always come back to the issues that we cover here. We're also thinking about the library. We'll come on to that very shortly, because as I've mentioned at the last lecture, there really is an excellent distance learning library at the university. We've been providing distance learning for over 25 years. We do understand the issues that you may face and the issues you may face in gaining resources. So never be afraid to ask for help, because there are librarians there in the library waiting to assist you. We'll be talking about referencing guidance, in-text references, the bibliographies, and the types of software available to support you. And we're recommending RefWorks, and Andrew Dunn will tell you a little bit more about that in a moment. Now, critical thinking is fundamental to your learning throughout the module, because we're asking you not just to take on board what it is that we're telling you, but to actually challenge that and to think about how does that work in practice, and what is more robust, what is based on better evidence, what is more convincing and why, and so that you're able to discriminate between pieces of information and between resources available to you, and think about what is going to be able to make your case the best. In order to do that, there is quite a bit of reading. So thinking about how you read, improving your reading skills, or perhaps just refreshing your reading skills, making sure it's critical, taking notes that are going to enable you to get back to your thinking and your reading without necessarily having to read the whole thing over again, is really important. And we look at thought mapping because lots of people like to use that to help stimulate their thinking about a resource or an issue. So on to this week. These are the activities that you are involved in this week. So firstly, you're going to be downloading the article. So in week 1, you had an article to download, but that was relatively easy because the article was in your reading list, so you didn't have to search for it. This time, the challenge is to put in practice your knowledge of the library resources in order to find that reading for yourself. And that's going to be an important skill, finding your way around the library, finding articles and books and resources. And that's going to come in handy when you do your own searches for literatures, such as when you're preparing your individual assignment for this module. So let me just ask you, how many of you have managed, so the question is, have you managed to download that article? Let me give you the poll. So have you managed to download that article? Okay, so 2 have and 3 haven't. Okay, well, fantastic. That means after today, you will be very well set up in order to do that, because we'll take you through exactly how to. And those of you who have done it can always provide assistance if anyone is having any problem. But by the end of today, you certainly know how to do that. Your next task is the plagiarism tutorial. And again, I'm going to ask the same question. So have you undertaken the plagiarism tutorial? So let's post that. Right, okay, sorry, I need to go back because I'm getting overly enthusiastic here. So have you undertaken the plagiarism tutorial? Okay, so very similar sort of numbers, and that's fine. So again, you'll find that you'll be taken to the plagiarism tutorial through the materials, so you can follow the links to that, and it's really useful. So plagiarism is something that people get really, really worried about, and it is hugely important. And knowing what it is, understanding what it is crucial to avoiding it. But I would also urge you to not panic about plagiarism and referencing. So make sure you're trying to reference, make sure you understand when and why you need to reference, and try and do that consistently throughout. If, for example, you're getting the journal in the wrong order than the title of the article, we are not going to penalise you for that. Rather, we will point that out and help you to sort it out so you're getting it right. Not referencing or not acknowledging the sources of information is a different thing. So the key is just keep trying. If there are technical errors, we will help you adjust it. Don't panic, but make sure you know what plagiarism is so that you can avoid it. Okay. So I think that's a very helpful tutorial. Lots of people are surprised at exactly how far plagiarism goes, and there's some really detailed descriptions as well, and you get the experiences of 4 different students to see some very different forms of plagiarism. So I think you'll find that useful. So make sure you've worked your way through that over the course of this week. But above all, get into the habit of referencing, be consistent, try and get that information in, follow the guide, but don't panic. And again, thinking about taking notes, which we will be talking about later, make sure that you include your references when you make notes, because there's nothing more frustrating than going back and you've got a fantastic quote that you want to use to illustrate a point that you're making. And it's so frustrating to then find you can't find it. You can't find perhaps the article, or if you do find the article, you can't find where in it. And the amount of time I have spent wasting trying to go through and find something, again, that I know I've read, but I can't remember where, is yet to be counted. And so whilst I preach these things, I also have to force myself to practice them. So you do the same. Make sure, just over reference your notes, because there's nothing worse than having to search for them later. And then your third task is a note-making practice this week. So for this, we take you through a range of different methods of making notes. And then we ask you to choose one method and make notes on that Bone Bright article that you've downloaded. Now, this is a risk-free environment in which you try something new. So I would really encourage you to not just use the same old tried and tested method that you always use, but do something different. Perhaps you think you might be a more visual person and you want to try something more visual. Look at the Cornell methods that we've talked about. Many people start reflecting on the kinds of note-making practice they've used in the past, and often use a lot of highlighting, and that can be useful. But my question about highlighting would be how much you can highlight as you're sort of starting to drift off to sleep. So you can highlight without engaging. So what are you going to do to make sure you're still interacting with the materials? What are you going to do to record your reaction to them? Remember, we're not so much concerned with you being able to recite or tell us exactly what some particular author said. We want to know what you think about it. How does this work in practice? Is it convincing? Is that something that you would like to try or have tried in the workplace? All of your reactions, about what makes it convincing, about your questions, about, you might say, hang on a second, they've only tried this in a particular environment. Would that be relevant to my environment? Or this type of learning that's being talked about, that's all very well when you're talking about 2 or 3 people, but how does that work in a large group of people? All of those reactions need to be stored as well, and it's that that will make you remember your reading. So this is why note making and critical reading are so related. So I'm going to ask you something else again. I do like to poll. So I'm just going to end the last poll, but so who uses highlighting as the main note-making method? Yeah, so that's exactly what we would expect. It's a really quick way of getting through material, isn't it? And it can be useful. You can immediately go back to it. So I'm not suggesting it doesn't have its space and place, but also think about what else you can add to make it critical. Now, the good thing about this task is that you undertake your note-making method. What happens with that? Nobody's going to ever see it other than yourself. So it's your risk-free opportunity to try something new. Then what we ask you to do is post your 300 words on the method you used, what it worked for, how it didn't, whether it was critical, whether it made your notes critical, and what you might do differently, or whether you would change that another time. What would you have to add in to make it more effective? And by posting that, you can each comment on the posts of your classmates. So you can learn from the methods that other people use. So if you've got 15 people in your study group, you've got 15 experiences of note-making that you can learn from. So if you all try the same one and use the sentence method, for example, which you will come across in the materials, that's going to be interesting because you may have different views on it. But what will be more interesting is if you've tried between you a variety of methods. So think about what you're doing and what you're choosing and what you're familiar with, and step outside your comfort zone. But also look at the posts of other people and comment on the posts and think about, that was similar when I've tried that kind of thing, or I'm going to try this method because it will be different. See if you can make links between your experiences and those of others in the posts that you put forward. You will also get feedback from your study group tutor about things that can be learnt from this exercise. So it's a really good one to do. So please do take the time and engage in that. It's really, really useful. And those are skills that will continue to evolve throughout your time on the MBA. But you're starting here to test new approaches out and see how they work for you. And that will set you up well for taking notes as you move on with the programme. So by the end of this week, so effectively by next Monday, because you'll start the week 3 on Tuesday, you will be much better able to find your way around the library. You'll know what plagiarism is and how to avoid it. You'll be clearer on referencing conventions, but again, that's something that takes time to come, but you'll know where there's a really clear guide on how to use that. You'll have an understanding of what critical thinking is and what critical reading entails and active reading, and be putting that into practice. And you'll have tried out one form of note making. And so you'd have completed those 3 activities. So next, what I'm going to do is take you through the video with Andrew Dunn. So if you bear with me for a moment, I will play this for you. And I shall be alongside you here, so feel free to ask questions in the chat as we go. Okay, so any questions that come up along the way, let me know. Let's ask them here, and then you can go away and try things out. But so let me hand over to the video, which should start imminently.
Hello, welcome to this second part of your MBA induction. This session is going to be on
Okay, so let me just end that. We'll go back to where we were. Right. Okay, so there was clearly some problems in following the video from mobile devices, but if you have struggled there, don't worry. As I say, I will make that video available outside of this recording as well, so that you can both watch the whole recording of this lecture, should you equally that the recording of the library is available separately, so that you can just go back to that as and when you need it, because it's really useful. And of course, you'll be using some of those techniques right away, the downloading the articles, for example, but others of them you may not use till a little bit further down the line, so you may want to come back to that video to refresh your memory on that. It is really useful. The library are really helpful. I think you got the idea from Andrew Dunn, that they are so happy to help. So any question, however big or small, get in touch. The library will even help you if you're struggling to undertake a literature search, or you feel you're not covering everything. You can always contact them to explain what you've done so far, and they will happily advise you if there are other things you could do or search. So they are a wealth of information themselves, as well as helping you access a further wealth of information. So at the end of that video, Andrew Dunn touched on the notion of the software to support your referencing. You don't have to do that by any means, but I would really, really encourage you to do so. And if you are going to use it, it's worth doing it from the beginning, because there's no point waiting a year and then starting your references database. Well, there is a point, but there's a lot more point to have done that from the beginning, because you're collecting the PDFs, you can make notes on the articles within the data, you can label them so that and put them in different files so that you can select everything on HRM or whatever subject, your evidence-based management or whatever it is that you're looking at, and keep them together. And it's a really sophisticated way of doing it. It also means that as you write your assignments, you can select the reference and it will put the reference in and build up the bibliography at the end. So Andrew also mentioned the Harvard referencing system, the author date system, and again, so you can see from the library where you do that. And have a look at those videos that Andrew mentioned, because they're really helpful in working your way around what's there. So has anybody got any questions about what you've heard from Andrew so far? And if you have got any questions about that, any aspects that are either unclear, confusing, you want to know more about, raise your hand first of all. Let's do it like that, and I'll see if we need to give audio rights or whether we can do that via the chat. So any questions from any of that so far? So Andrew's given a very clear overview. It may well be that those of you who are watching this in the recorded, so by all means ask the library, ask Andrew directly, do the Ask Us facility from the library homepage if you've got questions, and post them on Blackboard. Again, remember that one of your resources available is the group of you. So it may be that one of you has found your way into doing something that others have yet to do, or has found a really interesting source. Well, you can talk about that, whether that's in your MBA Cafe forum or whether you're doing that within one of the forums that are moderated by us. Okay. So if you haven't got questions, we will move on. There's no reason, I'm glad, if you haven't got questions, that means that's clear, that's fantastic. So there's no pressure to have questions at all, but feel free to just tap away in the chat if you feel that something comes to mind and you'd like to know more. Okay. So thinking forward to next week. I know you're only just into week 2, you're 2 days into it, so week 3 doesn't start till next Tuesday, but it's worth looking ahead. So it's been busy in the first week, and this week you've had lots more reading to do in terms of the links from the material, and next week there's going to be a bit more of that. So what we're focusing on in the 3rd week of your induction is about learning. So we're going to introduce you to different theories and models of learning, which you may have come across in other areas of your study and working lives in the past. But what we're trying to get you to do is to help you think about and understand how people learn, and specifically how you learn, and how you might develop your approaches to learning and improve your learning. So you're going to have an opportunity to reflect on your own learning preferences and to think about how you can learn better or learn differently, and particularly to think about what you're given your reflections on how you learn, to think about what kinds of challenges learning at a distance may pose for you. So, for example, some people tell us that they really like that kind of traditional lecture setting. You can sit and just listen to somebody talking. You get some of that via distance learning, but you also have other ways of learning. So which ones are you going to be more comfortable with than others? Others feel that talk around issues is a really important part of how they embed their learning. That issue of trying to articulate an idea or explain a theory or recount an argument that is put forward by an author you are reading. The very process of doing that can help you learn, because it's as you start talking that you realise how much you can articulate and how much where you struggle and how much you're finding, actually, hang on a second, why was it that they said this? So actually talking about your learning can be really useful for some people and can highlight what you have learned and what you're struggling with. So again, if that's a useful way for you, then think about how you can use the discussion boards to assist you. And we introduce you to a theorist called Vygotsky, who talks about the zone of proximal development, and we'll explain next week. But one of the things that Vygotsky emphasised was the way in which we can actually learn both by helping others. So you become an expert if you just know a little bit more than someone else, but that relationship between a novice and an expert doesn't have to be a vast difference in knowledge at all, but that actually sharing what you've learned and using what you've learned to assist somebody else to learn actually enhances your own learning, but also that you can therefore learn from somebody who's just one step ahead of you. So actually, again, emphasizes the value of the group. So how you can embed your learning by assisting others and by looking and thinking and reflecting on what you're learning and making those public through your posts. So in the first week, we've encouraged you to get some very introductory posts onto Blackboard. But what we'd like to encourage you to do is really grapple with the ideas that you're coming across. So you'll do a bit of that this week, a bit more next week, and lots more when you get into the substantive part of the module. Okay. So we're also thinking about learning styles, and we present you with notions about learning styles and also ask you to challenge some of these popular notions. Don't always believe what you hear without question. So we'll take you through some of those learning styles and some of the challenges to them. You're going to be moving on to effective writing and also talking to you about preparing for assessment. So there's the formative and the summative assessment. So there's lots of formative assessment within this module. So you can undertake the exercises, you can explore the ideas, and you're going to get feedback from Fred in particular at this stage before moving on to the assessments which are going to contribute to your overall scores, and you will hear much more about that as you move into the 4th week and beyond. So in the week to come, you'll have the same mechanisms through which you're learning as you have had up until then. So we'll be focusing in the materials online on the self-guided lesson on the approaches to learning. You'll have a reading list with additional readings that we'd ask you to look at, and again practice those note-making skills that you've been trying out this week. You can try different ones as you're working your way through that. You'll also, very excitingly, have your first online seminar. And actually this lecture is very similar. It will be very similar in the sense of there'll be a smaller number of participants, and you will get together, you'll be given presenting rights, be able to present and talk, and there'll be discussion. So it's a really good way of getting to know each other, working together and working with Fred. So you'll have your seminar towards the end of week 3, or sort of halfway through week 3. So there won't be a lecture next week, so hence there's no specific lecture related discussion forum, but you will have a seminar. So that first online live seminar for your study group, so that will just be study group level, and you're also going to have 2 activities. So I'll tell you a little bit more about those. So, firstly, your activity 3.1 next week will be the Visions of Success activity, and this is linked to R1. So the work for this will be in the build-up to that seminar and culminates in the seminar. So that is why I've already posted on Blackboard, on the announcements and general queries forum at the cohort level, I've posted on Blackboard the detailed instructions for that, which tells you what needs to be done and when. And during the course of today, Fred will be making available in your study group forums the details of team membership. So please come back to Blackboard and look at that to find out more about exactly who your team is. So Fred will nominate a team leader, and in my detailed instructions I've explained the role of the team leader. And then the team leader and the team will be responsible for identifying a spokesperson for the team and a backup spokesperson, and there are a number of roles that will be shared out amongst the team, including somebody who's responsible for posting your poster, which is the task at the heart of that seminar. So your team will be charged with developing a poster to represent what you see as what success on the MBA looks like. And also we ask you to think about what are the biggest fears and challenges at this stage of the MBA. And that will form a poster that you present at the seminar later in the week. And so you will be judged, your team's poster will be judged in terms of which presentation was clearest in terms of the message, engaged the audience, and had the most visual impact. So again, there's lots of details about what you can do and what you can't do and how that ought to be organised. So you'll find that in my detailed instructions. Fred will be able to tell you more about teams, so look out for that. So this is, it's exciting, but it is challenging, and it's really good to give this a go now and enter it wholeheartedly, because this is how you find out how do we make teams work at a distance within distance learning. So I'm sure in your working lives you've thought about what makes an effective team. Well, what makes that different in this context? You may well in a work context have managed a team or led a team or been part of a team that's operating in a virtual way across many different locations. So you've got experience of that potentially. But again, this is a different context. You're here for different reasons, and so working out, okay, what works, how do we make this work within the context of distance learning. Really useful to get that sorted now. So once again, the effort you put in here will stand you in very good stead for later on. And actually this makes for a really good, enjoyable and fun seminar next week. So one of the challenges is when you read the Bone Bright article, you're thinking about how teams work and the different stages of forming effective teams. And for this task, you are needing to make that team come together really quickly. You've only got a week to undertake the work, divide up work, get things started. So you do have a leader within your group, you will have a leader within your group, but all of you need to work together. So if for some reason the leader can't immediately get on, it might be that another member of the team says, okay, well, let's get started. So you've got to work out between you how best can you make your team as effective as possible to meet the challenge of the activity. So that is your first activity next week, but you begin to think about this week. Now, don't let that distract you from your tasks this week, because, as I say, the issues around note making, critical thinking, reading, all of those are important both to this team task, but also to the work later on. So get this week's work done and start thinking about next week's, which can run along, this activity can run alongside the work that you're doing this week and the work that you're doing next week. So any questions or concerns about that before we move on? So raise your hand if you have already found my instructions about the week 3 task. Great. Okay, so the instructions are there and available, and you can lower your hands now. Thank you. And then, so are you all happy that you feel you know what you're doing with? If not, feel free to either type in the chat, or if you'd like us to experiment with the audio, then I can raise your hand and I'll switch people's mics on. Okay, I think so the instructions are clear. I don't think the team details are available yet, but they will be shortly, so look out for those and get going once you are seeing those all there. Okay, so that's the first activity next week. Again, alongside all of this, there's lots of reading. Like I said, you're going to come across the readings about the different kinds of theories of learning. Don't worry if they're difficult going. Some of them are, some of them are not. And some of them we've given you just extracts so that you've just got an idea of what the theory is. They're really useful to draw on in a whole range of contexts, both for your own learning here, but also you may find it useful in thinking about what goes on in the workplace as well. So look out for the team membership and the info and the other seminar info, which will be available on your study group discussion board. Make sure you've noted down the time of your seminars and be quick to get off the mark to make contact with your team members, and make you support your team leader as much as you can. Then your second activity next week will be in relating to learning styles. So again, this is, as I mentioned earlier, it's about reflecting on your own approach to learning, and you will be asked to make a post on the study group discussion board, and so to talk to others about your preferred approach to learning, about how you can use the knowledge that you've gained during the week to think about how you learn and potentially put things in place to deal with issues and challenges that you might face. By thinking about distance learning in advance, you can anticipate where kind of pinch points are going to come, or where it might be that you might expect things to be difficult, or what kinds of things you're going to find more challenging and what kinds of things you'll find more straightforward. And that's going to put you in a really good position to get things in place and to reflect and think about how you're going to maintain your progress through your MBA. Thinking about these things would also form a useful basis for when you meet your personal tutor for the first time, which you will begin to do shortly after the induction is finished. So if you've thought about what you see as the challenges of distance learning, and actually there are not just challenges, let's be honest, there's huge advantages in distance learning that may also suit you. But thinking about what that's going to mean of how you manage your studies is a really good idea, and you may wish to discuss that with your personal tutor when you meet them, which you'll do into the first weeks of the main body of the module. And you can then discuss with your tutor, as well as reflecting yourself, on what you might do in order to ensure you maintain your progress through your MBA. So, thinking beyond week 3 and beyond the induction, from week 4 you will be on to the substantive content of the Managing and Developing People and Organisations module. So this will be the last time that we will provide you with a very specific reminder of your learning activities for the week in the lecture. So by the end of the induction, we're expecting you to be fully familiar with the weekly learning resources events, and so you're not going to get a detailed to-do list in the lectures or that kind of recap of the week's activities. So instead, from week 4 onwards, the lectures are going to focus on the substantive content of that week's topic. So we're moving on to the topics and concepts and ideas and theories of the module, and that is what the lectures will focus on. So the end of week 3, you'll move into the substantive part, and the third lecture, which will be released as a recording rather than a live lecture, will introduce you to the topics of weeks 4 and 5. And then you'll have a seminar which will relate to the topic of week 5 and to your individual assignment. So from then on in, the lectures are not about the tasks, but the lectures are about the concepts that you're encountering. And that's why we move into a recorded lecture, because we know, as you've already seen, that it's so, you're very busy with all the things that are going on in your studies, let alone all the other areas of your lives, your work lives, your family lives, your leisure lives. And you can then watch the lectures in your own time. So that brings me to the end of the lecture today. I am here and will be looking out for you on Blackboard. So if you've got questions about today's lecture, then and you're watching this in the recording, then please post them in the Lecture 2 forum, which I'll make sure is available to you. And equally, if you're participating today, then by all means, if something comes to you later, then you can ask me the questions later on. The other thing to say is that there will also be a video to explain a bit more about the careers team and the resources that are available through them. So that will also be made available later, probably by this afternoon. So I will put an announcement on when the lecture, the library video and the careers video are available. So have a look at those in your own time. And again, as always, Keep asking questions if more comes to mind. But what we're trying to do is to introduce you fairly gradually to the range of resources that are available to you. I hope that you're starting to feel that you've found your way around the virtual learning environment now, and that having heard from Andrew Dunn, you can see a bit more about what is available through the library. Continue to use these 3 weeks as your risk-free opportunity to explore, to find your way around, do a bit of kind of picking through all those links with what's there. Look at the wealth of videos available to you, and enjoy the week, and really, really enjoy next week's seminar and the work building up to it. Very often we find that students meet the people that they find they're working with in that team. They learn so much about how to work together as a small group that very often the relationships and mechanisms of communication sorted out there are used as you go on through the programme. So you make the most of those links. Yes, I did notice that you've lost the connection. I'm not quite sure. I think hopefully you're back with us, and I hope you've not missed too much, but do come back, particularly if you want to review things again. So does anybody have any questions or anything about what I've covered here today, or things that you are struggling to find or do within the virtual learning environment, or any questions about the materials or anything so far in your experience of the MBA? I can see. So we've got some typing going on, so I shall look out for those questions and then I'll see if I can answer those for you. It's funny, isn't it? Because you've only been on the programme for just over a week, and I imagine you must feel that there has been so much, and you will have had lots of emails from different sources. Great. Okay. So that's really good. I'm glad. So I'm happy with the wealth of information shared so far. Good. And I hope it's all clear. That means that we're getting things across in a clear way. But if anything becomes more tricky, let us know. And then we've got so far so good. I'm thinking about the presentation we should make with the next week. Right. And how will it be? Okay. So the detailed instructions will explain this a bit further. But what we're going to do for you is we will set up, Fred will set up within your study group discussions, forums, separate team discussion forums that will only be visible to you. They won't be moderated, so they will be available for you to communicate with your team, and you can share files. What we're asking you to do is develop a PowerPoint presentation of 2 slides effectively, or potentially 1 if you want to combine it like that, but we give you that choice. So you'll be making a PowerPoint presentation, and we will give the details of how you should use that within the instructions and how you should save that and get that to us. But you'd be able to share that on your team discussion board. The other way people find works well is they'll do some of the discussion on the individual team discussion forum that's created for you and will be made available shortly. But they may decide they're going to set up a WhatsApp group, or quite often people will use Skype and have Skype meetings at set times. The other thing you can use is, remember, on the left-hand menu of Blackboard, there is the student room. I went in there yesterday actually and bumped into Anton, who was also there. So that's there, and you can always use that. It's available for you. So you would have moderator rights in that room. That means you'd be able to upload a PowerPoint or a PDF file and just sit with your teammates. You could use a whiteboard to collect ideas. You could just have a kind of play around with the icons in order to find out what you can do within Blackboard Collaborate. It's also, of course, an opportunity for you to test your presentation for the seminar. Again, all the details of exactly how long you've got to present and who's presenting and how that works and how the rest of the team are involved, because basically next week's seminar we'll have all of you involved too. So there will be opportunities for you all to speak. So why not go to that student room and test it out beforehand if you wish to, as well as use that to do your work. So you can find other means outside of Blackboard to communicate. If that works for your team, then great. And we've got excellent. So Fred's already on the ball and has identified who are the team leads. So Deepthi, you're obviously the team lead for one group, and you will know how is your team mates by going to the activity 3.1 on the discussion forums, study group discussion forums that Fred will set up, and he will paste on there, and if it's not there already, it's going on today. I know he's putting that out. It will say who the rest of your team members are. So for those of you who find yourself in Deepthi's team, make sure you're looking out to assist and to get things started. So that means the teachers will know that they've been appointed as the team lead. So that means you're ready to get going. So what I suggest you do when you next have a minute is go and have a look at that discussion board, see what's there, see you're fairly shortly your private team forum will be set up and you'll be able to start talking on there. So you've not got a lot of time, so the sooner the better. And of course, you may be at slightly different time zones. Your working days may be slightly different. We've tried to keep you not too different time zones so that you can at least find ways of coming together, but we'll see how that goes. But it might be that you have to do some virtually and some asynchronously so that you're not at the same time. So again, that's part of the challenge, making sure that you can get the work done whilst accommodating the different timetables, schedules, commitments of the members of your team. Okay, so we've got one team leader here with us today. Have we got has anyone else been asked to be the team leader? Ah, okay, so we've got 2 of the team leaders here today. 3, brilliant. Okay, so, fantastic. You'll be able to go away from today's session and get your teams going. You can also use the email facility within Blackboard. So once you've got, if you go to the front, you can identify who the people in your group are, and you can send them an email directly from Blackboard. So that's another way of communicating. So there'll be all sorts of things. Find out the different ways of communicating. The other thing to do is don't be disheartened if there's 1 or 2 people that are not participating. Obviously try and encourage that. We will try and encourage that. But actually, again, that's one of the challenges of the task, because some people will have taken a while to get onto Blackboard and maybe the odd step behind you, for example, the group of those of you who are here live, or your things have been a bit delayed and they may be a bit behind getting through the materials. So we recognise that it takes people a little bit of time to get through and to get through everything that you get at the beginning. So you'll need to do some encouragement as team leaders, but you also may find that some people are just not at that point yet. So working out how you're going to make that work is an important part of the process, but also working together. Great, okay, we've got another question I think is being typed. So we will ask you to post your posters on Blackboard at the end, and I love seeing all of these because they're often really creative. People sometimes ask, so what you can put on there. You make it, it's your poster. It's great to have it visual. You can't use animation, even though you'll be uploading a PowerPoint slide, but don't use animations because that just doesn't work within the Blackboard Collaborate. So, and it's worth sending your PowerPoint. You'll be given a date by which you need to send it to Fred. But as I say, you can test it out in the student room, which is worth doing, because if you upload it, you can see and just check that it's coming out how you intend it to do. Because sometimes people do these incredibly sophisticated slides, and it's a shame if they then get ruined. So why not test them out? Most of the time they come out very well. So Deepthi, if you've got a question, I can see it looks like you're typing. It may be that you've got your cursor in the chat box. So yeah, so let us know if you have got something. Right, okay, you're fine. No problem at all. Excellent. So on that note then, I shall say enjoy the rest of week 2. Make the most of it. Ask us if you've got questions. And I'm really looking forward to seeing the products of your team work in week 3. Any questions, let us know. And I know we're finishing a little bit early, but I always allow quite a bit of time, just in case there are lots of questions, but also so that you can shape it a little bit. And it's very much dependent on what it is that you need. That's a great pleasure. I love to meet you all here today, and I'm looking forward to meeting those of you who can't make it. We do know that you can't make all of these. Thank you all. Okay, so what I will do is I'm going to switch off my microphone. Wonderful, good. I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you on Blackboard. I'm going to switch off my microphone now, but I'm going to stay around here for a few minutes, and I'll stay around until about 1 o'clock. So if you've got questions that come to mind now, then do let me know. I'm just going to switch off the recording and formally say goodbye to you and to all of those who are watching the recording. So goodbye everyone, and see you on Blackboard. And for the rest of you, I will stay around and have a chat if you've got anything further to ask.